Well, good morning, everyone. We'll give everyone a few seconds to log in. Happy Friday. We're so excited to have another wellness webinar for you in our year of health. Um, Remember that if you have any questions during this webinar, you can email the questions, and I encourage you to do so at questions@pbk.com. So we will be fielding those questions, and then when the presentation's over, have the opportunity to ask them. We've had a lot of great questions come in at the past webinars, so I encourage you to do so. I am honored to introduce Roberta Anding. I'm excited to tell you a little bit about why we're talking to her, why she's here. So she is an assistant professor of orthopedic surgery for Baylor College of Medicine, and a co-director of nutrition education for the medical students. She served as the director of performance nutrition for the Rice Owls for 10 years. In this role, she was responsible for provisions of preventative and performance nutrition for the Owls. She is a former sports dietitian for the 2017 World Champion Houston Astros, as well as the Houston, Texas NFL franchise and the Houston Ballet. She was the first director of sports nutrition for Texas Children's Hospital in the Department of Pediatrics, Adolescent, and Sports Medicine sections, and led the program for 17 years. She's also a co-founder of the elite sports nutrition consulting group Performance 365. If that isn't enough, she is the past chair and education director for the Sports and Human Nutrition Practice Group for the of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. She has been honored with the SCAN Achievement Award in 2011, Distinguished Dietitian Award in 2008, and the Texas Dietetic Association Media Award in 2006. So she is so accomplished. This is also part of the family because now her daughter is the sports dietitian for the current World Series champion, the Texas Rangers. So I can say I was honored to take her class when I was in school at Rice, and it left lasting impact now for 20 plus years. So we're honored to have her. So Roberta, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today, and we'd love to hear from you.
Great. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. And as I'm listening to the intro, I think I must be 100 years old, given the places that I've worked, but not quite 100. And I'm excited to be with you today because I think in 2024, it's actually a whole lot more difficult to determine what makes sense and what is nonsense in the real world. And so we're going to cover some topics today. We're going to talk about health fraud. We're going to talk about how do you control body weight. And I'm going to make a distinction for you between scale weight and body composition. And eating out, how do you make good choices when you're eating out? And then what about meal preparation with everybody being busy and having all kinds of other obligations? And so you are exposed to nonsense every day. So when you hear the word detox, one of the things that just needs to jump out to you is that is fraud. If you have a liver, I'm assuming you do, if you have kidneys, assuming you do, that you have a fabulous detox mechanism inside of your own body that works for you 24 hours a day. Now, it is true that these mechanisms work better with a healthy diet, but you don't need to detox. Also, you do not need to cleanse your colon. In my world, that's called a laxative. So cleansing your colon is also not something that you need to do. But you log into your computer and all of a sudden these ads come up with, are you feeling bloated? Are you gassy? All of these little triggers for you. And whether you can acknowledge it or appreciate it or not, we are all influenced by this. Additionally, when it comes to marketing of big companies, and I'm talking in this case, food companies and supplement companies, they have gotten away from engaging experts and spending their marketing dollars on influencers. And so it's relatively cheap to blitz social media with influencers that may or may not have any experience in nutrition or health and wellness. So let's talk about how do you know if it's health fraud. If it tells you it's a miracle cure, your doctor doesn't want you to know. I am married to a physician. I work with physicians. Trust me, they want people to participate in their self-care, but nothing out there is a miracle. If it's promoting weight loss and you don't need to diet or exercise, fraud. If you're looking at a supplement label and you look at the supplement and it looks like it's something that might be really good, it's an overall wellness supplement, and you see the word proprietary blend, what that company is telling you is we're not going to tell you all the ingredients because this is our secret formula. And so the next time you're at the grocery store or Walgreens or CVS, pick up a supplement and I'll guarantee you there's going to be products on that market that are on those shelves that say the word proprietary blend. Additionally, oftentimes influencers will use what I call almost medical words, or it's medical words out of context. So you might see something like this supplement is designed to promote transcription of DNA and RNA. So there's some truth to those words, but not in the context of that supplement. And that's where it gets really dicey. And for those of you who are involved in education, I think we can all do a hard pause when we look at how many of the consumers in the real world really have great exposure to biology, anatomy and physiology, and we replace that with I'm doing my own research. And again, where are you doing your research from? Are you going to a medical center library or are you clicking on clickbait? And I apologize, my dog is going to be a participant in this webinar. So anything that is an ancient remedy, or again, your doctor doesn't want you to know, is fraud. And this also indicates no biological plausibility. No biological plausibility, meaning that what they're telling you has no basis in science. So I love this. Ban cult poison now is when we expose miracle cure as bleach. I was on a bus heading back from Orlando after spending some time with the Astros, and someone on the bus knew that I worked for the Astros and I was their dietitian. And they were telling me they had this really great alkaline water and it had a pH of 14. And I said, well, you know, that's bleach, right? And it's like, no, no, this isn't bleach. I give it to my own kids. And I said, well, that's probably a call to CPS because that is not something that you can give. So again, even the basic fundamental concepts of what is normal pH is oftentimes lost, and unscrupulous companies, and trust me, there's a bunch out there, are going to market to that. So where do you as a consumer, where are you going to get your health information from? Are you getting it from a slick marketer? And so this is the Liver King. And the Liver King he's holding up a piece of raw liver. Please don't do that. You can hold it up, just don't eat it raw. And he is promoting this as this is how I got this body. And you can tell I'm not 21 years old. He promoted an ancestral diet as a strategy to gain muscle, not mentioning that our really prehistoric predecessors had a life expectancy in their 30s, so it didn't really make any difference. They were all going to die young from something else. He was at his peak, had a net worth of $12 million. So you had a whole bunch of people going to the grocery store and buying raw liver. What he neglected to tell you was he was using anabolic steroids to the tune of about $10,000 to $12,000 a month. And once that was exposed, he kind of fell off the radar screen a little bit. But in the meantime, he made $12 million on your back. This is harder to sort out in 2024 because some of the influencers, and I will point to my own profession, embarrassing to say, I have peers out there that are marketing garbage because they're following the money. And it's embarrassing to say that, but here are two other examples. Dr. Oz, when his program started early on, Dr. Oz, cardiovascular surgeon, still practices in the New York area, but he went on TV to try and help consumers sort things out. And his initial shows were great because he would talk about what is reflux disease and he would give really great illustrations. But as that kind of wore thin, you started to see this influx of, well, in order to lose weight, why don't you take green coffee bean extract? What about green tea extract? And it became almost an infomercial for fad diets and dietary supplements. So he, in this picture, was brought before Congress and was grilled, and they said, of the products that you're advertising on your television show, is there scientific evidence to suggest that they work? And under oath, he said no. And so now we have very popular, and I think he's a big personality, which I think honestly is important if you're going to be a marketer. And this is Dr. Huberman, a neurophysicist from Stanford. And his podcast may be about 80% true from the nutrition standpoint, because that's the only thing I can consider myself an expert in, about 80% true. But the 20% that he also includes in these podcasts are not true. So now you're a really interested consumer and you want to take good care of your health. Where are you going to go? And I'll mention here, and certainly can provide the links to it. There are a couple people that I recommend that are always factually based. And one is Dr. Stu Phillips, and his social media handle is McEnprof because he works at McMaster University in Canada. Dr. Stuart Phillips, and he is an expert on lean body mass gain. He is an expert on protein metabolism. He is superb. And so if you look at his number of followers, it might be in the range of 6,000. It's not going to be 21 million. So sensationalism sells, and folks like Dr. Phillips, who's outstanding, oftentimes doesn't get the press. Another person that has emerged on the scene as a debunker of fraud is Dr. Nick Tiller, Tiller, exercise physiologist. And he is also superb and makes a career out of lambasting fraudulent marketers on the market. So as a consumer, I really empathize with you because this kind of information is everywhere. How do you cure wrinkles? Does collagen work? All of this information that's out there, and we oftentimes lose sight of what does work. When we look at food choices, and I know we can have folks here on this webinar that are international themselves, or they're involved in a system that has a lot of international influence. Most culturally based diets, true culturally based diets, are better than grab and go. So if we look at a traditional breakfast that might have beans and rice in it and tortillas, that is going to be a diet that is rich in protein. And yes, it does have dreaded carbs. Or we can take a look at the next picture and it's eggs and toast and maybe a vegetable juice drink off to the side. Eating protein at breakfast is really pretty critical to set the stage for appetite regulation. We can't control our appetite. Appetite is not a function of willpower. When you're hungry, it is not going to go away without food. But making sure that we support families with cultural food choices is critical. In my years at the Astros, and we certainly did it at Rice, we had beans and rice at every meal. And I was told at Rice, oh, that's never going to fly. Athletes don't want to eat beans and rice. And I said, trust me, they will with the right kind of education. So if you're an egg person, that's great. If you're not an egg person and really looking for protein, it could be a Greek yogurt with a high protein cereal and maybe a little bit of the protein fortified milks like Fairlife, or if you're in Texas, it could be HEB Mutopia. So what does work? What does work? What are the principles of good nutrition that maybe I'm sure you've heard before, but relatively speaking, many people are going to look at as boring. So real food matters. And I'm going to say less bars, less snack items. So when you're thinking about what should I bring into work that I can keep at my desk, things like clementines and apples, a high quality turkey or low fat jerky, as long as you don't have significant hypertension because they are high in sodium, you can have real food at your desk. Variety makes a difference. And so when we look at what people eat, as consumers, we eat about the same 50 foods a day. Um, Meaning that we don't have a whole lot of variety. It could be the same breakfast cereal every morning, the same turkey sandwich, and variety is lacking. Keeping culturally based meals, if that's part of what you do, is keeping culturally based meals. Working with your physiology is also important. And we can't not have a conversation about exercise. So exercise and nutrition in my world are like peanut butter and jelly, okay apart, much better together. So when we're talking about optimal wellness, yes, the quality, I'm a dietitian. Yes, the quality of what you put on your plate matters, but so does movement. Movement matters. Human beings are not designed to be at a desk all day long and then come home and watch football or Dancing with the Stars, whatever you end up watching in your evening programming. So it's important to make sure that those are the things that work. So let's do a little bit of a deeper dive. Fad diets. You can only manipulate three things. You can manipulate carbohydrate, you can manipulate protein, and you can manipulate fat. So keto diets, paleo diets, Whole30, carnivore, low carb, high protein diets. Every single diet that works, in part, the reason it is working is because there's a caloric restriction. So if I go on a keto diet and not eating carbs anymore, I'm giving up cookies, candies, cakes, pies, chips, burgers, pizza, alcohol. I have made for many people a significant reduction in the types of foods. The challenge is the carbohydrates are gone, and I'm going to highlight some of the benefits of having decent amounts of carbohydrate. Pritikin diet, high carb, low fat, oftentimes moderate in protein. Just because of the higher focus on carbohydrates, you would see some vegetarian options there, like beans and hummus would be on a Pritikin diet. Vegetarian and vegan, it could be high carb and variable amounts of protein depending on how you go. I also want you to think about when you take out a food group. So if I take out carbohydrates and I give up all the cookies, candies, cakes, and pies, but I give up brown rice and I give up fruits and vegetables, now all of a sudden I'm losing those nutrients and I've created a nutrient hole. There's no replacement. There's no replacement. A fiber supplement is going to happen. So yes, will you lose weight on a keto diet? Absolutely, you'll lose weight because you've given up higher calorie foods. Will I lose weight on a Pritikin diet because it's low fat? Sure, I will, because I've given up cheese and nuts. Although these are great foods, they're calorically dense. So understanding fad diets, you can only manipulate one of those three nutrients. And so any new diet that's on the market, you need to ask yourself, is it high carb, high protein, high fat, low fat? And portions absolutely matter. So this is really current. This is a picture of Robert Griffin, who is a reporter for the Olympics in Paris, and he bought a croissant. And I don't ever think I've seen a croissant the size of your torso, but clearly that will feed a family of 10. That is not a singular croissant. And so what we know is portion sizes have increased over the past 20 years. They've gotten bigger, and the research suggests we eat about 92% of what's on our plate. So it'd be great to say eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full, but that mechanism is not quite as fine-tuned as people think it is. So a strategy can be serve yourself on smaller plates. Fill the plate, but instead of having a platter, which many of the nice stores sell for kind of an eclectic look on your dinner table. Rather than a platter, maybe a salad plate. Fill it, and at least it's going to cue you if you decide to go back that maybe I don't need to fill this whole plate again. Another strategy to help with appetite regulation, remember we don't have the ability to control it, is eat protein first and overserve vegetables. So I'm not promoting weighing and measuring. Tracking can be great for some people, but busy professionals oftentimes don't have the ability to do that. Enter into the lexicon here is something that I think we probably could all intuitively know, but ultra processed foods. Ultra processed foods, these are ones that have many ingredients that include food additives that make it taste better, improve the shelf life, but they're rarely ingredients that you would have at home. And so if you look at a label and a label says it has glucose powder, and you think, I don't even know what that is. I don't have that in my pantry. That would qualify as an ultra processed food. Don't confuse that with processed food. So whole wheat bread, 100% whole wheat bread is processed because you're not eating the raw wheat grain. Olive oil is processed because you're not growing your own olives, I'm assuming, and squeezing the oil out. So we need to make a distinction between processed and ultra processed foods. And the reason that is important is, again, another great great YouTube videos that are out there. This is Dr. Kevin Hall with the NIH, and he did a research study that said, okay, I'm going to put people into two groups. One is an ultra processed diet, predominantly fast food. The other is unprocessed, which might be pasta and vegetables and fish and chicken, and said, here's the buffet, you can eat as much as you want. So when individuals had the ultra processed diet, fast foods, they ate in general 500 calories more a day. They also had a significant change in body weight. So let's just think about the ramifications of that. Let's say you work 45 minutes from where you live. You leave work at 5:30 and you don't get in the door until 6:30 or 7, and you have a family to take care of. The temptation is, I'll just pick up something on the way home. And I'm going to give you some strategies that I'm going to call almost homemade that will hopefully help you as we go through this. So how does your body work? And I'm going to say, unless you're a competitive marathon runner, or unless you have an adolescent male in your household who's a baseball player trying to gain weight, bodies are not made to be chronically fed. You don't need 3 meals and 3 snacks if you have a desk job. You don't. You need 3 meals, and maybe we could argue 2 meals. I could argue that if you wanted to go that route. But food is supposed to stretch your stomach. That is not a bad thing. So when people say, oh, my stomach stretched, your stomach empty is about the size of your fist. And when it stretches, very cool physiology, when it stretches, it releases hormones that go to your brain and say, food's on the way, I don't need to keep eating. But if I eat a bar that is 250 calories, I can give you a low-fat turkey sandwich for about 200, and you're going to feel more satisfied with the sandwich because it takes more chewing. It's not as calorically dense. So stomachs are supposed to stretch. So part of that stretch response can be facilitated by, you sit down at the table, you've had a really busy day, you're pretty hungry, and you want to promote that stretch. Have 2 big glasses of water or unsweetened iced tea. Have 2 big glasses before you start your meal. Those fluids don't stay in your stomach long, but they do promote a stretch response. So some great work came out of a lab at Virginia Tech, and this research was done by Dr. Brenda Davy, And she showed that people that had 2 big glasses of a sugar-free fluid before a meal voluntarily ate 300 calories less. Nobody told them to, nobody was weighing and measuring the food, but they were allowed to respond to their physiology. So again, it sounds great to say eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full, but we have to help our physiology. So what does make you feel full? Fiber. Fiber. So one of the things about being vegetarian is you've got more plants on your plate. The fiber content of vegetarian diets is higher. And oh, by the way, people who eat vegetarian, if as long as it's well planned, if they eat vegetarian, they generally have a lower BMI. So whole grains, fruits, and vegetables make a difference. And that's why I always say overserve vegetables. Please don't buy into the hype that there's too much sugar in fruit, because all of the colors in fruit, the fiber that is in fruit, make it respond differently than having an equal amount of sugar from a candy bar. Protein, always have protein with a meal, and making sure that you have adequate amounts of volume on your plate, that your portion sizes are not so small. So, protein intake and weight management. What does the science say? And so you can see I'm going to deputize all of you and make you junior scientists. 6 large studies looked at protein intake and body fat loss. Greater fat mass loss, which is important because we don't want to lose just scale weight. Greater fat mass loss and better maintenance of lean body mass was achieved when the protein intake was around 20% of calories. I'll say it over and over again. Protein improves sensations of fullness. Protein at each meal with a really nice whole grain carbohydrate, oftentimes referred to as a low glycemic index carbohydrate, may be an optimum strategy. So protein intake and weight management. Because the new weight loss drugs, Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, these GLP-1 drugs, really do cause a reduction in appetite. People lose a lot of weight on those drugs, and I think for many people, those drugs can be a great strategy. However, because the calorie intake is dropped so low, what we're seeing is not only great fat loss, but great loss of lean body mass. So if you're contemplating one of those drugs or you're using one of those drugs, please get them from a physician, because compounding pharmacies are not reliable sources. The internet is not a reliable source of going and buying Ozempic. Please don't do that. They can be adulterated, they can be contaminated, they can have varying levels of the active ingredient. But please make sure that the protein intake of your diet is high, and you must resistance train on those diets. So not only is it important to get protein, but you have to have protein throughout the day. That's why I said most people need to have 3 meals. So at least 20 grams of protein per meal. And you think, I don't know grams. Talk to me in food. 20 grams of protein is about 3 ounces. So that would be 3 eggs. That would be a higher protein Greek yogurt with maybe a high protein breakfast cereal put on top for crunch, like a Kashi Goleen, which is about 14 grams of protein. You're going to be able to get over that 20 grams. So it doesn't always have to be something that you cook, but making sure that you balance that protein out throughout the day is an important consideration. As Americans, we don't do that. We eat very little protein at breakfast, better at lunch, and most of it at dinner. Sad news is that's not how your body uses protein. It uses protein equally throughout the day. So your muscles build and repair protein. So for those of you who like pictures versus graphs, you can see individuals that eat 10 grams for breakfast, 15 for lunch, 65. You're probably not going to be able to use all that 65 grams of protein, and you might be better off skewing that and having more protein earlier in the day. So if you're someone who tracks their calorie intake, like on MyFitnessPal or Lose It, it'll give you a protein goal. It never is going to help you with protein distribution. So that's why I've included that in your wellness presentation for the day. Which protein, if you're going to take a protein supplement, is most effective? And it's whey protein isolate. Whey comes from milk. I don't work for the dairy industry, but when we look at what is the most effective source of protein for lean body mass gain, it is going to be whey protein. It's going to be whey protein. Second in line, if you're vegetarian or you have a milk protein allergy, second in line, as you can see here, is going to be soy protein isolate. So you can certainly get a soy protein isolate powder if you want to do that. The pea and the brown rice products that are on the market are less impressive in terms of their muscle mass gain. So now what do? We're now looking at resistance training. Here's the great news. It is never too late to start. You could be 90 years old and start on a resistance training program and you're going to get some benefit. The challenge with aging is not that you can't make muscle, you just can't hang on to it. So if you get sick or you get injured, the muscle mass essentially falls off the bone. So what is progressive overload? Progressive overload means that if you start out, you've never lifted in your life, and you start out doing a bicep curl, one of the nice muscles in your arm, with 5 pounds, your body will acclimate to that. And all of a sudden, 5 pounds is not enough weight anymore to cause fatigue. So then you go to 7 and on and on and on. And sooner or later, you're going to be able to lift more weight than you ever thought you needed to. So when you're looking at where can you get good information online, I would start out and take a look at exercise patterns from the CDC. When you think about maximizing your work in the weight room, and if you're local to Texas and you're a huge Houston Texans fan, which I'm going to say that N oftentimes is pretty small. This is one of my football players at the Texans, Troy Evans, and he was lowering his weight to an 8 count. And look what he is doing. He's got a 45-pound plate around his waist. There's not any place in the real world that I could ever do that. But don't skip on half of the exercise. So when you look at an exercise resistance training, there's the raising of the weight, which is called concentric work. The lowering of the weight is eccentric work. So maximize that lowering phase, slow that down, fight against gravity, and you're going to get better results. You don't need a snack around resistance training unless you're working this hard. So this is one of my former defensive linemen. And oh, by the way, I do have their permission to use their pictures and their story. This is Seth Payne. And what is remarkable about him is you can tell he's on crutches, injured his hip, so he can't use any of the fancy equipment in the weight room. So the strength coach is using a towel. So it's not the equipment, it's the intensity. He's using a towel to help him work his biceps. So you do not have to have fancy equipment. At some point, you probably are going to need to buy a set of weights and have a bench in a garage. You don't need a gym membership. What you need to get stronger is consistency. You can't do it once a month and say, well, I tried that resistance training stuff and it didn't work. So the older you get, the more important strength training becomes because you lose lean body mass as you age. You lose it from injury, you lose it from inflammation, and fighting against that is an important consideration for all of us. All forms of exercise are great. Flexibility is great, cardio is great, but nothing is going to build lean body mass unless you lift. And why are we so concerned about this? There is actually a medical condition called sarcopenia. And sarcopenia comes from the Greek word called poverty of flesh. And progressive loss of lean starts at about age 30. Probably not going to notice it in your 30s and 40s. Can be caused by inadequate protein, limited resistance training. And inflammation can also be causative. So what are the causes of inflammation? In part, it's that ultra-processed diet. It is the ultra-processed diet. It's relying on a diet that's predominantly fast food, that the meals are rarely prepared at home. It's eating out on a regular basis. So when you look at this cross section of an MRI at age 25, you can see that that muscle, and that's a cross section of an arm, you can see that muscle is most of the white, which is the fat, is right underneath the skin. Look what happens with aging. The circumference of the arm can be the same. The composition of that arm is not. So not only is there an increase in under the skin or subcutaneous fat, you can see that fat now infiltrating the muscle. And that causes the muscle to not be able to function like it used to be. So we've all seen, if you're fortunate enough to have older family members, people in their mid to late 80s, that when they walk across a room, they shuffle. They can't take big steps anymore because once they get out of the center of their gravity, they're much more likely to fall. And the older you get, when you go to your doctor, they're going to say, have you had a fall in the last 3 months? Falls can be literally life-threatening. And many people that lose lean body mass, they truly fall and they can't get up. They don't have enough muscle mass to get back up on their feet. And so we want to increase muscle mass. And again, increasing protein, eating consistently, resistance training, and you also have to be able to sleep. 20 years ago, when sports nutrition became really popular, nobody was talking about sleep. They're thinking, everybody's young, you can get by with sleep deprivation. And that is not true. When, as an adult, you get less than 7 hours of sleep on a consistent basis, or you're getting more hours but poor quality, let's say you have sleep apnea, you're much more likely to have hypertension. You're much more likely to have type 2 diabetes. So how do we make better choices? How do we make it easier? How do we make it obtainable? Can you meal prep? What about eating out? And this is something that is in the public domain and it can be used. You don't have to be an athlete to use this plate. But this is how, when you're deciding how to fill your plate, this is how you fill your plate for body fat management. And when I'm talking to groups like this, I always say, I want you to envision half of your plate belongs to me. Half of your plate should be fruits and vegetables. Here's the secret though. It doesn't have to be fresh. Frozen is great. It doesn't spoil. You can keep it for longer periods in your freezer. You can stock up on frozen vegetables and frozen fruit. You can get frozen strawberries, thaw them out, and put them as part of a fruit salad. And it does not have to be fresh. It also doesn't have to be organic. I think a lot of people think, well, you know what, I can't afford organic produce, so none of this is good for me. Or as I mentioned before, the sugar content of fruit is too high. And the answer is no, it isn't. So half of that plate should be fruits and vegetables, limited amount of added fat. So despite all the cooking shows that show you can free pour olive oil all over your food, literally nobody can do that. Nobody can do that. What about making good choices when you eat out like at a buffet? I always say pre-shop. Half that plate still needs to be fruits and vegetables. Choose lean protein most of the time. So that's going to be chicken and fish. Anything that ends in the word loin is going to be lean. So if you get a pork loin chop, that is going to be leaner. Why does that matter? An ounce of chicken or fish is about roughly 30 calories an ounce. An ounce is about the size of a silver dollar. An ounce of brisket or ribs or a high-fat steak like ribeye is 100 calories an ounce. The protein content's the same. The fat content is not. So avoid sweet drinks, and sweet drinks are things like lemonade, fruit punch, sweet tea. You do not ever, unless, again, you're recovering from an ultra marathon, you don't need sports drinks. Sports drinks are designed for people who are training outside in a warm and sweaty climate. The exercise is more than an hour. Sports drinks, lunch is not a sport, dinner's not a sport, so sports drinks don't belong there. They don't belong there. The next question is, can you meal prep? And I'm going to say, yes, you can. So again, when we start to think about the impact of breakfast skipping, and breakfast skipping to me is that first meal of the day. It doesn't mean that it has to be at 6 o'clock in the morning. It could be at 10 o'clock in the morning. But you want to make sure that you're having something with protein. 10th time I've said it. What we know from the science is people who have a higher protein breakfast are able to control their cravings and probably via controlling their blood sugar later in the day. It could be dairy. Again, it could be a lot of different options out there. If you have no time for breakfast, this would be a second line choice. A second line choice could be a protein shake. These are expensive. There's not one on the market that I look at that says, oh man, that's a deal. In part because whey protein is expensive, but Premier Protein, I have no stock or investment in that company, is probably one of the lower lower cost ones on the market. Certainly the Walmart brand is going to be a lower cost item. These are mostly milk-based. The beauty of this is it doesn't have to be refrigerated because it is in what's called aseptic packaging. So this is ultra pasteurized. It is not going to spoil. So it works well if you refrigerate it and don't drink it till you get to work at your desk. Try egg muffins, which we'll talk about in a second, and overnight oatmeal. So here's something that you can make on a day off, whatever that turns out to be for you. And you can take 6 eggs and a cup of egg whites, any leftover vegetable that you had the night before. So let's say you had fajitas the night before and you take the leftover peppers and onions, you mix that in. You could use any lean meat if you chose to do that, mix them all together, bake for 18 to 20 minutes and let them cool. These will last for a week in your refrigerator, but here's the tip. If you put them in the refrigerator covered and they're warm, the steam is going to continue to come out of the egg and they're going to get mushy. So you can take 2 of those in the morning, busy Monday morning, you had a really hectic weekend, but you made your egg muffins, and now you can pop 2 of those in the microwave, put them in a piece of paper towel, and now you've got breakfast on the go in the morning. A couple other things to think about for optimum wellness, and this has emerged over the last couple of years, is a vitamin D deficiency. So when we think about putting together a wellness plan, it's diet, it's exercise, and is there the need for strategic supplementation? And the answer is yes. Vitamin D can have negative impact on immune health. And I think we were all, and I will use the word forced because it was everywhere. We were all forced to think about immunity during the COVID pandemic. And so when we look at what supplements out there stimulate immune health, this is the hero. It is not elderberry. Vitamin C can have a smaller role. Vitamin C, if you take it at the beginning of a cold or a flu, may shorten the duration. It isn't going to prevent it. And so many individuals who had the most troubling outcomes, ventilator dependent, really ill with COVID, the research is now telling us many of these individuals had a comorbid condition, particularly type 2 diabetes, congestive heart failure, and they also were vitamin D deficient. You cannot tell if you have adequate amounts of vitamin D based on just your food source because the primary source is the sun. I don't advocate skin cancer as a way to get that. So what are our food sources? And this, again, I think is where some of the misinformation that is out there. So salmon is a great source of vitamin D. Look where milk falls in. 3 ounces of salmon, and it can be canned, does not have to be fresh cooked, doesn't have to be wild caught. It could be canned salmon. Canned salmon has almost 500 international units of vitamin D. And look where milk is. It's in the 120s. And this is great marketing by the Dairy Institute. And you see it on the container at the store, vitamin D milk. So we all grew up with that, but truly salmon is going to be a better choice. The vegetarian choice is portobello mushrooms. And so there we go. So going back to that almost homemade. So in that interim, I wanted to make sure that you knew how to put some vitamin D sources in there. Buy frozen vegetables. Vegetables can be added to any dish from spaghetti to rice and beans. And beans, use canned beans. So if you wanted to make quesadillas, you can open up a can of beans, take some leftover vegetables, mix it in, put with a really good cheese, add a nice fruit salad off to the side, and you've got a dinner on your plate in a short period of time. Meal planning for dinner. To also take a look at rotisserie chicken. You can take a rotisserie chicken, and again, in Texas, and I'm sure many other grocery store chains, they are now deboning and providing you shredded chicken as an option in the deli case. You can take that, mix it with a package of frozen Asian vegetables. Yes, use the sauce, maybe some instant brown rice, and lo and behold, you've got a healthy meal. You can do a Mexican tortilla wrap by adding that rotisserie chicken with a can of beans. And when you look at the cost, and I did this 6 months ago, so I'm sure it's a little bit more expensive, that when you look at this, the total cost for 3 meals is about $4 a piece. You can also make things happen by thinking about a smoothie. Smoothies you can make in bulk and just freeze them. So if you have Yeti coolers or Stanley coolers or any of those at home, make a big batch of smoothies on the weekend, freeze them in a Yeti or a Stanley or the generic version. Put a little bit of plastic on top so you don't get any kind of oxidation of the fruits and vegetables, and then take that out the night before, and then you've got something that is slushy the next day, and you've got something cold and refreshing. And you can tell I live in Texas because cold is always there. Grocery stores do a lot of the pre-work for you. They'll cut up your pineapple. Yes, you are paying more for that. I 100% get that. But you can also take raw vegetables and a Tupperware or a bento box and put in sliced fruit and vegetables. Wasabi peas with some whole grain crackers are a great protein. And now you made a bento box and it takes 5 minutes to pull that together. You can also look at things that are portable. You can get dehydrated soups and beef jerky. Kodiak cakes make an instant high protein oatmeal that you could also make at your desk, and these cups are about $2 a piece. And so if I'm in Houston, there's lots of different options that are available to me, and I'm sure there are options that are going to be available. Are supplements dangerous? Yep. Yep. Half of the drug recalls since 2004 have been with supplements, and consumer protection is non-existent. Supplements do not have to be tested for banned substances or anything before they reach the market, and the United States is woefully behind. So in addition to vitamin D, make sure that you've got 2 cold water fish meals per week on your plate, because those are a great source of omega-3 fatty acids. They are great. Cold water fish is a great source of anti-inflammatory compounds that are beneficial for brain health, fatty liver. And as we get ready to finish up, dinner guidelines, as I said before, always choose leaner protein. Always choose leaner protein. Avoid the bread and chips when you eat out. Ask for a cooked vegetable as an appetizer. And when you're eating out, ask the waiter or the wait staff to grill it dry to avoid those foods. So common sense in the real world, real food works. Humans are meant to eat a wide variety of foods. Exercise is essential to maintaining strength and weight maintenance. Protein should be consumed at each meal. And the bottom line for all of us, if it sounds too good to be true, it is. And here is my contact information. And I'll turn it back over to Melissa and Julia, and certainly my dog Finn as he's barking away. So I apologize for that. So thank you so much for hanging with me.
Thank you, Roberta. I was taking copious notes because I loved the kind of the very practical nature and truth that you were speaking. We had a number of good questions come in, so I will feed those to you. The first one was in reference to something you said at the very beginning. Can you recommend any peer review studies that show that detoxification and colon cleanses don't work?
Yes. So I can certainly send you that link, Melissa, and you can share it with me. And I would encourage, and again, I have no financial gain in this. Nick Tiller has a fabulous book on pseudoscience. It is unbelievably good, and he talks about peer-reviewed studies. So colon cleanses can come in a variety of ways. People can either use something like senna, which is an herb. It's also found over the counter as a laxative in something called Senecot. And the thought is you are going to remove toxins from your gut. And so do we eat things that every single day that are probably deleterious for our health? The answer is yes. The difference is, and this is something really important to understand about physiology, is that when we talk about your small and large intestine where food and water and vitamins are absorbed, in the small intestine, your villi, which are the absorptive surface of how food gets from your gut into your blood, your villi are well protected. They are well protected. So bigger molecules, some of the toxins that are out there, can't go from the gut into the blood. So understanding that gut physiology, there are some exceptions to the rule. If you are someone with Crohn's disease or inflammatory bowel disease, celiac disease, and you've got injury to that gut, I would be so careful about taking any supplement. I would tell you don't drink kombucha tea. Don't take in probiotics because you've lost that protective barrier. So I will find you a couple studies, but I love the question because it said peer-reviewed studies, right?
Yes.
They're asking for science, not influence. So I love that.
Good. Well, thank you. The second question, was, we are architects, and engineers, and a lot of the work that we do is related to children, and
Yes.
education. And so, as you know, these are great things I think we can apply to our lives. But one thing we're seeing overwhelmingly in schools is an uptick in, um, allergies, not only food
Yes.
allergies, but seasonal allergies. Talk to
Yes.
us a little bit about things that, as parents or in our kind of, educators, what can we do to help combat that naturally? Because you talked about, supplements and the potential recalls there. What are natural remedies to that, or things that we should be cognizant of?
I think there's a couple things to be cognizant of. And yes, food allergies are on the rise. And so what you're seeing now in early pediatrics, in newborns, is actually exposing them in small amounts to allergens. Exposing a newborn, and I have two young grandchildren, and my son and daughter-in-law have done that. They've introduced peanut early. They've introduced sesame, which is an emerging allergen. They've introduced those early, but once somebody is in kindergarten, the horse is out of the barn.
Mm.
So is there a natural solution to that? And the answer is no. Can you cure that with or treat it with a supplement? The answer is no. So many schools, based on the number of children, and you see this more in public schools than private schools, will have things like peanut-free zones. Can't even have peanut oil used in cooking. And so I do think the public school system, because there are food and nutrition standards nationally for public schools, do a much better job because all of those public school food systems employ dietitians.
Mm.
They all employ dietitians, and their job is to make sure that allergens don't reach the campus. And another plug for school health and school nutrition is children who eat school lunch are better nourished than children who bring lunch from home,
Hmm.
because the lunch from home could be an Unlunchable, a Capri Sun, and some chips, where at least in that school lunch, there are school lunch standards. Doesn't mean the children are necessarily eating them, but it's served. It's served. And so we do know, even though in the past 15 years, there's been a big plug to improve school lunches, That doesn't necessarily mean children are going to eat them. But what we know about pediatrics is the more children are exposed to a healthy food like broccoli,
Mm-hmm.
the more likely they are to choose it. The more likely they are to choose it. So, not aware of any supplement that is going to naturally undo a food allergy.
Got it. Next question was, how would you recommend approaching drinking alcohol? What does it look like in moderation?
Drinking alcohol. Yeah, I didn't include alcohol. Moderation is, I guess I'm going to say it this way, it's not what you're served. So I had a graduate student of mine go through, right close to Rice University is Rice Village. And I had them go into a very popular restaurant and buy a glass of wine. And it was 9 ounces. It's a single glass, but 9 ounces. So when we look at what is a standard serving for alcohol, it's a 5 ounce glass of wine and it's 1 ounce of hard liquor. That doesn't mean that's what you're served. So moderation, just like it's lost in portion size, it's lost in portion size with food, it's also lost in portion size with alcohol. Women tend to be impacted by the deleterious effects of alcohol more than men. Women tend to not be able to metabolize alcohol as efficiently as men. So when we look at the guidance, it's 1 drink per day for women and no more than 2 for men. But I'd also say I don't think most people should be drinking alcohol 7 days a week, having 7 glasses of wine per week. Enter onto the market some non-alcoholic hard liquors that I expected to hate and didn't at all. I thought this actually has a flavor profile of what a tequila might taste like. So I would encourage people to look at some of the non-alcoholic brands of beer and hard liquor. Not really found a non-alcoholic wine that doesn't taste like grape juice, but I think there are some alternatives for people that are really trying to be social and practice moderation.
Great. Well, Roberta, we're almost out of time. I'll say thank you again so much for being here. It has been such a privilege to learn from you and for all of our team. Thank you so much for joining. We look forward to our next and upcoming webinar. We have, I think, 2 more to close out the year to talk about our physical health and then environmental and community health. So hope you all have a wonderful Friday. Thank you so much for joining. And we will send a recap. So if you have friends or colleagues that weren't able to join and they want to listen in, we'll be sure to send that out in this coming week. So thanks again, everybody.
Thank you. Enjoyed it. Have a great weekend.
Thanks.